A trigger is anything that activates a protective response before you've had a chance to understand what is actually happening. Contrary to popular belief, a trigger is not always an explosion. It can be subtle and still interrupt your ability to stay objective. And the danger is not just that triggers make you feel bad. The danger is that triggers quietly control what you are willing to learn, admit, hear, finish, repair, attempt, or become. So in this video, we ain't just talking about obvious triggers. We are talking about the quiet ones, the ones that shut down your learning before you even know you got uncomfortable. The ones that make you defend a belief you have not questioned in years. The ones that make you scroll past the very information that could help you. Because sometimes your biggest trigger is not disrespect. Sometimes your biggest trigger is evidence. Pause. Years ago when I was in this online community called the LPSG, and I was asking around because I needed to know where I could find some condoms made for men built outside the manufacturer's imagination. Somebody responded and said Walgreens. Now, instead of asking a follow-up question, I got offended immediately. Because in my mind, he wasn't giving me information. In my mind, he was implying I could fit into a regular condom or one of these Trojans. So I responded with something like, I can't even fit into a Trojan on a slow day, so shut up. And from there, it escalated. What could have been a simple exchange of information turned into a full argument. Me and this dude went back and forth like we was negotiating a boxing match with weapons. Now here's the stupid part. Years later, I'm walking through Walgreens for something completely unrelated. And wouldn't you know, Walgreens actually had extra large condoms, elephant size. The man was not insulting me. The man was trying to help me. He was trying to put me up on game. But because I heard his answer through my own insecurity, I turned information into disrespect. That is a trigger. Not because I started crying, not because I had some dramatic breakdown, but because one sentence touched a belief I was already defensive about. And before I could collect the whole 360 degrees of information, my mind grabbed an old script. Defend yourself, assume disrespect, attack first, ask questions never. And that reflex blocked me from learning something useful. For years, if you've ever sent somebody a text, watched them not respond, and immediately started building a legal case in your head, you may have been triggered. Now to be clear, I'm not saying you were wrong for noticing the delay. Some folks text back carrier pigeon late, but sometimes the delayed text is not the whole problem. Sometimes the problem is the meaning you attach to the delayed text. Whether you did or did not send something vulnerable, whether you did or did not ask a time-sensitive question, whether you did or did not open up a little bit. Your focus becomes more about them not responding fast enough and what that means. And the meaning you attach usually further affirms the self-limiting beliefs you already carry. See, you stop looking for information. You start looking for affirmation. Pause. So now you say, they disrespecting me. You say, they ignoring me. You say, I'm not a priority to them. And once that story starts running, it is no longer about a text. It's about a reflex reaction to a trigger you don't even realize is happening. So what is actually happening? Your deep sense of inadequacy, your damaged self-esteem, your open wounds around abandonment and neglect begin to feel threatened. And your survival instinct is to defend. But in order to defend, you first have to build a case. So now your brain starts using your negative internal dialogue as evidence against the other person. Type pause in the comments if you get that. And because of the emotional discomfort or how disruptive it can be to your desired emotional state, you now feel pressure to prove they did something wrong. So now you start finding fault in them for not replying fast enough to a text that may have arrived while they was getting a prostate exam or a pap smear. And that is how fast a trigger can turn uncertainty into an accusation and deny us the opportunity to learn, understand, or benefit from new information. Nothing has been confirmed. Nobody has explained anything, but your body already felt the threat. Your mind already wrote the charge, and your mouth just waiting on the sentencing. So what do? You pull back. You act unbothered. Send a dry response. You delete the thread. You post a quote. You go cold. Or punish them with distance before they get a chance to explain. That is how subtle triggers work. They do not always make you explode. Sometimes they make you interpret. Sometimes they make you assume. Sometimes they make you protect yourself from a threat that has not even been confirmed. Somebody type bars in the comments if you get that. One more example. Try talking to your mama's established belief around religion. You getting boxed out quicker than a point guard. And it may not be because she has no questions. It may be because she spent decades building a life around that belief. She raised children with it, made sacrifices through it, judged other people through it, lost relationships over it, found comfort in it, maybe even questioned parts of it privately, but never felt safe enough to say that out loud. So now, when you challenge one small part of that belief, she may not hear one small challenge. She feel the whole structure shaking. And by structure, I mean the belief system she has used to make sense of her life. That is the part that people miss. Sometimes the trigger is not new information. Sometimes the trigger is the cost of admitting that the old information may need to be re-examined. Because if one part is shaky, well, the mind starts looking at everything and wondering what else could be shaky. And for some people, that is too expensive emotionally. So instead of curiosity, they choose defense. Instead of reflection, they choose rebuttal. Instead of saying, let me think about that, they shut the conversation down. And all of this can happen within milliseconds. She does not feel herself going through some long emotional process. She may not notice a slight hint of fear, a slight hint of anger, the slightest exposure of her self-esteem. And once the brain identifies that discomfort, the reflex kicks in, the automated response, the programmed rebuttal. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is not always the trigger. The big deal is the reflex, the biographical and biological reaction to the trigger. You no longer collecting the full 360 degrees of information. Type bars in the comments if you get that. You are reacting from an old script, a pre-written defense, or response you may have been using for years to protect a stance you have not fully re-examined. And the problem with that is simple. You block out the possibility of new information. You block out the possibility of useful information. You block out the possibility of strengthening your argument or refining your argument or adjusting your position in a way that actually helps you advance. So instead you double down, you become more defensive, you become more dismissive. Sometimes you become irate. But you still may not be able to fully explain how the story behind your stance benefits you today. You may not fully understand the emotional journey that led you to that first thought, that first belief, that first decision, that first rule. You just know that when somebody gets too close to it, something in you says, defend this. Even if defending it is costing you growth, even if defending it is blocking your level of understanding, even if defending it is keeping you loyal to a version of yourself that was only trained to survive. Bars! Type bars in the comments if you get that. Now would be a good time to hit the like button if you like something, and if you motivated as hell, hit that notification bell. But if you really want to see this channel grow, I'm going to need you to hype my video, and I'm going to need you to share this with your folks. Let's get back to the program. When I say this, don't get your panties all in a wad, but this is a huge oversight of the Western world. Sometimes the trigger does not make you look emotional. Sometimes it makes you look certain. Certain you already know what someone meant. Certain they are playing with you. Certain they are disrespecting you. Certain you don't need more information. And the more certain you get without enough information, the more likely it is that your reflex is driving. Bars! Somebody you know is out there getting triggered by a delayed text, a different opinion, a tone of voice, a facial expression, or a sentence they didn't even finish reading. And they don't know it. They just think everybody else is the problem. So send this to them before they turn one more misunderstanding into a federal investigation with screenshots. But in the same way a delayed text can activate abandonment, a correction can activate shame, a facial expression can activate rejection, a different opinion can activate identity threat, a smell can activate memory, a racing heart can activate panic, how silence can activate old neglect, a question from your partner can activate the feeling of being controlled, a success story can activate the part of you that remembers what you stopped trying to finish. That is the spectrum, and this is where most people get it wrong. They judge a trigger, or they determine a trigger by how dramatic the reaction looked. But a trigger is not defined by how loud you get. A trigger is defined by what gets activated. Sometimes it activates emotions. Sometimes it activates a thought. Sometimes it activates a body response. Sometimes it activates a behavior. Sometimes it activates a whole identity defense system. You may not yell. You may not cry. You may not panic. You may not swing on some fool. You may simply stop listening. You may start scrolling. You may start joking. You may suddenly get sleepy. You may say, I don't care, right when you realize you care the most. You might say that's stupid before you understand it. You may say, I already know, because learning more would require changing more. And that is why triggers are so dangerous, because they don't just affect how you feel, they affect what information you get access to. They affect what conversations you stay in. They affect what feedback you can hear. They affect what relationships you repair. They affect what opportunities you avoid. They affect what truth you can tolerate before your protection pattern cuts to power. Somebody type bars in the comments if you get that. So the better question is not always why am I upset or what did they do now. Sometimes the better question is what did this activate? Because once you can identify what got activated, you can stop treating every discomfort like a threat. You can start seeing the difference between danger and data. Pause! Type bars in the comments if you get that. I was talking to one of my homies and he cracked a joke and said, that's why nobody be buying your t-shirts. I went off. I started talking about him real bad. I never really caught what was going on. What he was actually saying was my merch shop was still in test mode. So when people tried to make a purchase, it wasn't a real purchase. 2-3 weeks after the fact, I revisited this conversation with him because I realized that's what he was talking about. Don't feel sorry for it, brother. But the truth of the matter is, I really haven't sold a lot of merch. While most people will defend their triggers all the way to the grave, you ain't gotta be most people. Most people will act out the same reflexes for decades, the same arguments, the same withdrawals, same defensiveness, same shutdowns, the same that's just how I am. Same family curse with a different phone plan. And before they know it, they done live the same dysfunctional life cycle as mom and them. Type bars in the comments if you get that. But if you want to distinguish yourself from the herd, this is where you start. You stop asking, am I triggered? Because most people be too defensive to answer that honestly. You ask, where did the trigger reveal itself? Because a trigger usually shows up in one of 5 places. Write this down. What you felt, what you thought, what your body did, what you wanted to do, and what story you immediately started telling yourself. That's the map, because sometimes the trigger reveals itself in the feeling. You feel fear, you feel shame, you feel anger, you feel embarrassment, you feel resentment, you feel small. Sometimes it reveals itself in the thought. They disrespecting me. They playing with me. I knew I shouldn't have trusted them. I'm always the one who cares more. Here we go again. Sometimes it reveals itself in the body. Your chest get tight, your stomach drops, your jaw locks up, your posture change, your breathing changes, your heart starts beating like you got pulled over with expired tags. Sometimes it reveals itself in the urge. You want to leave. You want to scroll. You want to clap back. You want to go silent. You want to prove your point. You want to make them feel what you feel. And sometimes it reveals itself in the story. The story that shows up before the facts arrive. The story that says they don't care. They think I'm weak. They trying to control me. They trying to embarrass me. They always do this. That is where you catch it. Not after you done sent the paragraph. Not once you done posted the quote. Not after you done burned the bridge and started calling the smoke peace. You catch it when you notice the first shift, the first tightening, the first assumption, the first urge, the first story, because that is the moment where you still have a choice. That is the moment where you can say, hold on, what got activated? Is this danger or discomfort? Is this fact or old evidence? Am I responding to what happened or what this reminds me of? That is how you stop living like your reflexes got power of attorney over your future. Somebody type bars in the comments if you get that. If you ain't figured it out by now, everything I talk about on this channel really boils down to getting you comfortable with the emotional part of growth, evolution, and reinvention. Whatever project you keep stalling on, whatever dream you keep failing to pursue, whatever idea you keep sleeping on, more than likely your failure to act is not about laziness. It ain't about discipline. It is about avoiding the emotional discomfort that comes with the process. If you somebody who wants to become a relentless go-getter, Romani and I are hosting a live 90-minute workshop We're going to help you identify the emotional blind spots that are crippling your follow through so you can start working toward the things that actually matter to you. Yes, it is a live 90-minute workshop, you heard me? Come prepared to take notes. None of this multitasking and half-assing. If you really want to be about that life, the link is in the description. And this is where it gets personal. A lot of people are not stuck because they lack intelligence. They are stuck because their protection system keeps interrupting the lesson. Life tries to teach them through correction, through failure, through relationships, through feedback, through uncomfortable truth. But the moment the lesson touches shame, fear, rejection, insecurity, or old pain, the triggers step in like, no, 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 no. We not letting that in. We not doing that today. Talking about the devil is a lie. You are defending, not listening. You are building your case. You are not growing. You are protecting the same wound that keeps making decisions for you. That is how people get older without getting wiser. Type bars in the comments if you get that. Bars. That's how you hear the truth for years and still not change. Because hearing the truth is not the same as receiving the truth. Type bars in the comments if you get that. You can understand the advice and still avoid the discomfort required to apply it. Type bars in the comments if you get that. And that is the danger. Triggers do not only protect you from pain, sometimes they protect you from progress. Shout out to the LPSG Large Support Group because they helped me find my main squeeze going on 5 years strong. And truthfully, it helped facilitate my reinvention. Speaking of reinvention, this next video is going to accelerate your grow up and your blow up. So click it before it's gone.